Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. This is part 2 of our series on Compliance Center and Security Center as it relates specifically to compliance requirements. What's prompted the sessions that we're doing is that the GSA's STARS 3 contract, which is a $50 billion IT contract, suddenly came out with CMMC language in it, which means that CMMC is rolling out to generally all federal contracts eventually, and we had expected it to just be the Department of Defense. Now, the reason why this is important, if you are not part of the Defense Industrial Base, you probably haven't been keeping up on CMMC. CMMC is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and it is a true certification where most of our compliance requirements for security had been based on NIST 800-171, which were based on attestation. So you would say in a contract, yes, we are doing this. We have a POAM, we have an SSP, we have a path forward for security. There was never any actual audit unless there was an event that would precipitate that. And so I wanted to go through in terms of meeting compliance. Now, most people who are going to be bidding on STARS 3 contracts are going to be required to meet CMMC level 1. And I jokingly say that CMMC level 1 is the have a password level. It is really rudimentary security precautions that everybody should have had in place by now. But I will be going through and doing a video outside of Tech Talks about what the CMMC level 1 controls are. And now in terms of the maturity model, CMMC level 1 is basic security practices. CMMC level 2 is documentation of those practices. So what you have is at level 1, you're just doing it and you have to be able to demonstrate that it's there. So you have passwords on all of your devices. Whereas at level 2, you have to have documentation on how they were implemented. And last week, I went through the Compliance Center Manager, which showed how you could keep track of these things. And there is no CMMC level 1 control yet in Compliance Manager. We're still waiting on, we're waiting on CMMC to come out with or to finish the training of their first school of C3 PAOs, which is Certified Third-Party Auditing Organizations. And once that happens, we're likely to see Microsoft go ahead and roll that out. Now, there has been guidance published by Microsoft around CMMC and Azure, and we will get into that at a later date. So today what we're going to be talking about is data governance, retention policies, and information protection and the labeling of documents in order to make sure that they can't be exfiltrated. So let's get started. So what we're going to cover right now is organization-wide retention using Microsoft's advanced retention policies. And again, we're operating within the Contoso environment. And right now, where we're at in this is that we're finalizing new policies to comply with GDPR rules in the EU. And this does have definite effects coming into the US, whether you're multinational or not. If you have data on any EU data subject, you can be held liable against GDPR. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to have advanced data governance policies detect GDPR data and then apply a single policy to all of that data. So for now, we'll be retaining it, but we can also use these organizational-wide policies to automate data removal based on the same detection rules using keyword searches for PII, financial, or healthcare-related information. So we're going to do that here in the data governance section, and we're going to look at our retention rules. And so, like I said, for now, we're going to be retaining this data, but we can use it to automate data removal as well. So let's go ahead and create a new policy, create a friendly name. I'm still laughing about that. Give it a description. So you can see here that you can set your retain time and you can set to automatically delete after that period of time. And here's where I was saying you could have the automatic deletion. So nope, just delete any content that's older than 1 year, 2 year, and I believe the settings go all the way up to 7 year here. Actually, I'm sorry, This is a numeric field and will go up pretty much as high as you want it to go. But I doubt you have 1,000-year-old policies. So we want to go ahead and look at the advanced retention settings. And we want to detect content that contains sensitive info. And we'll go ahead and we'll set a search. And so there are already predefined templates for detecting personal info covered under new GDPR regulations. Now, if you do operate within the defense industrial base, you can go in and use regex, regular expressions, or set up your own rules in order to detect things like federal contract numbers, or you could have it set up where you would detect names of projects that you wanted to protect. But let's stick with the GDPR for now. So now this information will be retained as the company defines its long-term policies for new regulations. So here you can see that we already have automatically made rules for EU debit card numbers, driver's license numbers, national identification numbers, passport numbers, social security numbers or equivalent IDs like FTIDs, and EU tax identification numbers. And then when it detects it, it will retain that in a hold for 7 years. So let's go ahead and choose specific locations. So advanced data governance gives us the ability to unify policy enforcement across all Microsoft 365 services like OneDrive, SharePoint, and Exchange. And this results in really fast implementation. So we don't have to go through and do it by groups. We can, but generally we're going to get into that when we're covering e-discovery next week. Now we're going to go ahead and create the policy. And then let's look at classifications. So now we're going to show how to apply labels. Now we've already got this automatic system that is looking for fields that match sets of strings that are going to automatically identify this information as being under the purview of GDPR. Now, retention labels contribute to precision on data retention policies, allowing you to take control of what content to keep and what to remove. And if you've watched our tech talk on cloud app security or Azure information protection, this is run in really the same way. So let's look at what those labels are. And then look at retention. So you can see here that we have a number of labels already defined. So EU personal information or personally identifiable information retention, overall retention policy, medical records, and let's go ahead and look at employer records. So you can see here the name, description, which isn't there. Now the description for admins and the descriptions for users, this is interesting because when you're applying this from the back end, you're going to get a description for admins, and usually what you want to put in there is information about what the policy is meant to do, and possibly any impacts that would happen by bringing this into a group. Whereas the description for users, this again crashes into the Azure information protection and cloud app security, is sometimes you'll have policies set up, and I'm going to show one of those in a minute, where it will not allow somebody to send an email. And it will then deliver that description, which is often saying, hey, this information has been detected as a credit card, and this can't be sent, and then you can block it. So this is customer facing. And so if somebody is going to be deleting information, it will serve this description for users up for them, just explaining what their next steps may be. And that may be, hey, contact the compliance department, contact counsel, contact IT. So here we can see what the policies are: retention forever, retain only based on when it was created, and use labels to classify content as a record. So retention policies can be applied to every location where content is stored, or you can choose specific locations, like I mentioned, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. So let's look at the policies that are going to go behind these labels. Again, we're going to go over here to the retention tab, and let's look at the PII retention policy this time. So this is an auto apply label. that was created to find and label common US ID formats like taxpayer identification numbers, social security numbers, or passport numbers. And you can see that this automatically applies to Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Office 365. So it's all the way across. And you can see that it is one of the templated formats, and this includes what the searches are. So let's go ahead and look at the actual labels that have been applied. So now we have sensitive data protection labels and policies that are here in the same tool that we used for data governance. Now, labels can automatically apply information protection rules to reduce accidental leakage of confidential information, or they can be set up to deliver alerts. So this is a basic set of labels, including 2 confidential, pardon me, information labels. So you can see that we've got the sensitivity tab and we've got the 4 labels. So let's go ahead and dig deeper into non-disclosure agreement confidential. So this label is applied to information that requires an NDA to be in place before it's shared outside of the company. And excuse me. And we can see here where the name is, display name, the tooltip, which when you're in the software, and I'll show you this in a minute, it'll explain what this label is intent to do. And then encryption, is it going to be encrypted when it's at rest, content marking. So what this does is it allows us to create custom headers, footers, and watermarks that go on email messages or documents that have this label applied. So we've got content marking on. It's going to add a footer, and right here we just added the customized text NDA required. So let's look at internal only. Now, the internal only label is a step above the NDA label, and it's applied to information that should never be shared outside the company. There's a lot of reasons why you'd want to do this. It could be internal financials. It could be personal actions in the HR department. And, you know, usually things don't get like that, don't get shared out of the company that easily on accident, but it does happen. Particularly when you have somebody outside of the organization with a name very similar to someone in the organization. And if you're operating under GDPR and you accidentally leak information about one of your employees, you have to report that to your governing authority in whichever country you're in. And Germany has 8 of them, so good luck figuring out who you're going to actually get that over to. But here we're going to do the content marking and add a watermark. And so watermark sits over the entire top of the document, and here it is, Contoso Confidential. This one, excuse me, also has encryption enabled, so that information, if somebody does get in through any sort of lateral expansion where they're not really coming in directly with an identity, there's no way for them to just grab the file and run. The example that one of our engineers, Matt Amlung, has is that, oh, if somebody comes in and grabs this on a thumb drive and goes running 10 miles out into the woods on an air-gapped laptop and plugs it in, they're not going to be able to read that information. And then again, we're going to look at our label policies. And we've got a global policy here that is set up to publish that entire set of labels, making them available to all Contoso users and groups. There may be cases, if you have an R&D department, if you have a legal department, where you want to create individual sensitivity policies in order to give certain labels to certain groups. And that will also allow you to set up rules where only people in those groups have it. So for example, being part of the Agile IT leadership team, I have access to a label that is leadership only, and the only people that can open it are people that are in that Office 365 group. So let's look at this global policy. So this policy also requires users to provide a written justification whenever they remove or downgrade the label. So if we have something that's NDA required and we remove that label, we're going to get a prompt that is going to have us enter why we're removing that label on a document, and that will go into our overall logs. Now, that could be that it was NDA because it was a product that wasn't going to launch until September, and it launched early, and it's a public document now, and there's no more intellectual property vulnerability in there. So there's a bunch of reasons why you'd want to do that. So here you can see that it's publishing the 4 labels in that earlier group: personal, public content, NDA confidential, and internal only. And you can see how that hierarchy kind of builds. And then down here, you can see that we've got the settings. Users must provide justification to remove a label or lower a classification label. See what this looks like. So here we have a document open in Word that we're going to test the labels in. So you can see here, we've got the, the label bar and label options. And we're going to go ahead and set internal only. And when we apply this, the watermark appears and the information protection is applied. Now we're going to downgrade this to NDA confidential. And when we try to downgrade the protection, Office prompts for justification. So here we have the default selections of the previous label no longer applies, other as explained. Go ahead and confirm. And you can see the watermark's removed and it is shifted down to NDA confidential. Here we've got that footer that we set up for the NDA confidential. And that has been applied now instead of the watermark. And that is it for general compliance within Office 365. We could go a lot deeper in terms of building out policies. We've done tech talks like that in the past. Really what I'm trying to do in these 3 sessions is really drive home these capabilities are there. These capabilities map directly to CMMC requirements. So as you start to look and think about these policies, definitely give us a call if you want help setting it up. We have baselines that are automated and that feed, that apply directly to NIST 800-171, HIPAA. We're working on FINRA, and we already have most of the mappings done for CMMC. So we are here to help. For those of you watching online, thank you very much. This Agile IT Tech Talks are a service for our MSP and CSP clients. After these quick demos, we open this up for a live Q&A. And feel free, though, to ask questions down below. Now, I talked a little bit about GDPR today, and now you've heard me hype it up in other videos. We have just launched a new podcast, the Clearly Cloud podcast. And our first guest was David Pryor from Microsoft. He spent 10 years as the lobbyist for the House Democrats for Microsoft and is now the director of external affairs, basically. And his talk was on the 5-year battle to get the Cloud Act passed. Now, earlier this week, I was able to interview Carrie Lenning of Knowledgeance, who specializes in EU and US data privacy laws. And so she started out here in the US, full disclosure, she and I went to college together, and she started out here in the US, worked for Palantir and for Facebook as a privacy analyst, actually joined Facebook right after the Cambridge Analytica when Zuckerberg was saying that he was gonna beef up all of these privacy policies. She then went to the EU with Facebook, or I'm sorry, I reversed that. She started working at Facebook when she was in Dublin and got very involved in GDPR. She's done a lot of consulting work in the past, and what she's talking about in this interview is she's talking about the recent throwing out of Privacy Shield by the EU courts, which is changing the way that information can be shared between countries, particularly between the US and the European Union. And there's discussions on the Shrebs cases, Privacy Shield, GDPR, and it's really an eye-opening conversation if you aren't aware of the stories behind how it came to pass, what the actual effects are, and where we're going with privacy in the future. So definitely check that out. That next episode will be launching Sunday night at midnight, so it'll be available Monday morning wherever you listen to podcasts, be it Spotify, iTunes, Google, it's everywhere. So once again, thanks a lot for watching and have a great week.